Welcome to the Oomph Bootcamp webinar. My name is Leanne and I'm presenting this webinar from the Oomph offices here in Sydney. And yeah, today we'll be talking about just a few of the basics in terms of getting started with making your first Oomph app. So things that we're going to be looking at today are what is Oomph? So we can talk a bit about how the system works, how the platform works. I'm going to show you a few examples of apps that have been created using Oomph, and we'll look at different types of apps. Then we'll also look at the tools that you use to create your Oomph app. For example, the Oomph Viewer, Oomph Editor, the design tools you can use, and we'll be looking at what a bundle is. So we'll be looking at something called a Getting Started bundle. Then we'll dive into how Oomph works, looking at the folder structure, the types of files that you can use, the types of pages you can use, and setting up your working files. Then we'll look at a practical example, and this will help you on your journey to creating your first interactive app. So we'll look at how to create interactivity, how to export and test your files, and where you can find help. All right, so let's get started. First of all, what is Oomph? Oomph is a versatile tabs publishing platform that allows print and web designers to create and publish rich media apps without any code. So you do not need to know anything about JavaScript or HTML in order to make an Oomph app. You just need to use your current design tools. So we look at in more detail about how exactly that works. As a start, I'll just talk a bit about our company. So we work with a number of clients, quite a varied group of clients. They range from publishers to corporates like several banks, Westpac, Colonial First State, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and then also educational institutions like Bond University, Adelaide University, and some really well-known everyday brands like Coles. I'm going to show you a few more examples of apps or sort of pages that have been taken from apps that have been created using Oomph. I've divided them into four main categories, so rich media, interactivity, utilities, and then some advanced features. Right, so in our rich media section, we have an example from Gourmet Traveller. So this is a great example of how to use video as a video page to create a really great effect. This is an example from Fitness First magazine, another video page. So yeah, that's video combined with PDF on the text section. This is from an app called What Bird Call Is That? So this has an example of a card flip. It has a little full screen slideshow, and it also has audio in it. So it's got the audio player. And this is an app called One Central Sky, and this has, so this gives you an example or a great view into the types of apartments that are for sale in this development. So from floor plans to, there is a pop-ups and so on. This is an app called Orion. And this is a great example of how to embed a panorama image in your app. So Oomph is very compatible with all sorts of files, HTML, JavaScript included. This is from the Harley Davidson app, which is about to launch. It's a great example of video, animation, great panning images. And these are also full screen slideshows. I'm showing you more detail on each motorbike. These are objects, the type of slideshow called an object. So the slides, changing of the slides are triggered by hotspots on the page. And that also is combined with a long in-page slideshow, giving you a great way to get an overview of their timeline. Right, then in our interactivity section, so this is from Coles magazine, and down here you can see a few examples of the utilities I have in this app, like notes. You can schedule the meal, so that's a calendar event. When you rotate it, you can go into cooking mode. So this is the section that's activated using voice control. So by saying forwards and backwards, you can flick between these different steps. Also here we have a timer, which you can use while you're cooking. So yeah, that's really got some great interactivity and functionality specifically for cooking and using in the kitchen. Another example of hotspots triggering slides to appear or pop-ups to appear. This one is from a PwC annual report. So same thing. So yeah, this shows a great way of how to combine various graphs and make them interactive and I guess more interesting to look at than maybe in reams of printed form. Some utilities. So over here we have an example of sharing widgets. So here you can specify the type of content that you want to share via Twitter, Facebook, and email. Same thing with Twitter, and then you can also determine what kind of content you want to email. So yeah, this page, for example, can be created using just text, plain text, or something like a HTML page. So that's a sharing widget. On this page we also have a gallery. So this is a full screen slideshow. These are little pop-ups. Over here we have a card flip that has a map embedded in it. So in the same way that you can view a map on your web browser on your desktop, you can embed that sort of map in your app. This page has a calendar event. So calendar events, you can predetermine the name of the event, the place, the time. You can even set an alert if you want. So that can all be sort of pre-set up for your user, and then it can simply be added to their calendar on their iPad. This is an example of a form that's been in a Honda brochure. It's from the Honda Jazz brochure. So here you can enter your name, your details, and press submit, and then that information would be emailed through to the supplier or to the publisher. A few examples of some advanced features. So this page comes from the Royal Auto magazine, done for RACV, and it's essentially a series of web clips. So as you tap on these signs, you really like flicking. What you're doing is sort of flicking between their website. So we've actually clipped sections of the website and sort of reconstituted them into these sort of pages or tabs in the iPad. So you're having live data feeding from the website, from that page into your app. So yeah, what's great about a page like this is, once it's set up, you can easily feed new information into it without sort of redesigning the page, republishing the page. Right, this is an example from a hotels app. So you can preview what the asset looks like. So this is for people who are interested in buying properties like these. It also shows you a location of where the asset is located. Sorry, my internet's a bit slow here. Things are not loading quite as well as they should be. Little pop-ups. And this page is actually being created using HTML. So imagery over here in the form of JPEGs and then HTML here. What also is quite unique about this page is the ribbon up at the top and the status of the property are actually also feeding in live from an RSS feed. So that's a definite possibility, if you have that kind of content and want to include these live elements feeding in from either web pages or RSS feeds. This is a great example of using a custom-made HTML page. So you swipe across the screen, and that then sort of triggers the bottom layer to appear. And then you can interact with it. All right. So that was a few examples of assets and apps that have been created using Oomph, just to give you an idea of the type of interactivity and functionality that you can include. Now, onto more practical things. Let's have a look at what tools you're going to be using to create your Oomph app. Now, first of all, we're going to be using an app called the Oomph Viewer. The app can be downloaded for free from the iTunes Store, and you then install that on your iPad if you're going to be testing on your iPad, or you could use, in combination with the Oomph editor, you can use Oomph Viewer on the simulator on your desktop. So that is actually what I'm doing here. Using my simulator, I've got Oomph Viewer installed, and that's enabling me to click through what is essentially an app that I've created for this webinar. So just to tell you a bit more about the Oomph Viewer, let's go back to the library, which is what you'd see when you first download it. Okay, so you'll see a library, which is where you will be able to access all content that you've downloaded or side-loaded onto your device or onto your simulator. There's also a download section, so there's a few free bits of content that come with the Oomph Viewer. For example, the Handy Book of Oomph, which is a really great resource for when you're starting out with creating your Oomph app. So you can have a look at that once you've downloaded the viewer. So once you download it, it'll then sit on your library. Now I'll just go back into the app that I was using to present. Now, another feature of Oomph Viewer is if you tap once on screen, you'll see that this menu bar that pops up. So you'd have what we call a scrubber of thumbnails. So that enables you to go through all the pages in your content of your app. You can jump straight to a page via that scrubber. It also enables you to share the page that you're on. So this is a default form of sharing. So what happens is you take the viewer takes a screenshot of your page, and then you're able to email that, and that text in that is just its default, and it has a link to the Oomph Viewer app. So in this case, it's telling me I'm on the simulator. It can sense that, but on an iPad, it will send a link to the Oomph Viewer app that can be downloaded on the iTunes Store. So you can also bookmark your page. So that's this little sign here. So you can create collections. You know, you can name them yourselves. So I'm just going to call this my pages. And I can then save that page into my newly created collection. I can access my bookmarks also via this bottom navigation bar. So there we go. There, I've tapped on that and jumped straight back to that page I bookmarked. And you'll see that there it has a red sign, meaning it has been bookmarked. All right, so you'll be using the Oomph viewer to preview files that you've designed and to test them before you're ready to publish them. Now, as I mentioned, you can use the Oomph viewer on your simulator in combination with something called the Oomph editor. Now, the Oomph editor is this guy down at the bottom here. So it's, I'm just going to actually, I'm just going to load the file in there to give you an example of what that looks like. So I'm just going to load the cover of this app into the editor. All right, so here you see the interface of the editor. Now it'll show the folder that you've dragged onto that. It'll enable you, much like a Finder, to view the folders that or the files that you've loaded onto that. And by pressing play, you can send those files straight to the simulator or to your iPad if you have that installed. So the editor is a great way to quickly preview files, whether it's on your simulator or iPad. Something I must just mention is that at this stage, the editor only works on Macs. So if you are a PC user, it's not going to prevent you at all from creating an app or efficiently. You'll just be using iTunes to load the files onto your viewer rather than the editor. Right, now in terms of design tools, making the assets for your app or designing the pages, you can really use any design program or any program that can create a hyperlink. Now, most designers are already familiar with InDesign and use that to create assets for Oomph. And yeah, InDesign is a really great program to use because it's obviously got great design capabilities and it has the ability to export PDFs and to create hyperlinks. So yeah, PDFs are probably one thing that you'll be using quite a lot, especially for pages with text in it. Okay, so I'm going to show you a few pages in our Getting Started bundle now and just talk through, or rather the Getting Started bundle is the thing that I'm looking at right now, and yeah, we'll share these files with you after the webinar so that you can have them for reference and you can go through what we've talked through today. All right, so taking a bit of a closer look at how Oomph actually works. Now, there are two sort of distinct parts to creating Oomph assets or folders that will enable you to create your app, and that's layers and interactivity. Now, yeah, Oomph really uses a system of layers to create a page for an app. So in a few of the examples that I showed you earlier, there were examples that had video and then PDF layered on top of them. So this is such an example. So the bottom layer is a video page. So that is a movie file or an MP4 file. And then on top of that, we have two PDF files that contain text and probably contain page links so that you can link to other pages. Now, you can use a variety of different types of files to create Oomph layers. PDF, as I mentioned, is a very popular one. It's really good for text legibility and for holding your interactive elements. You can use video files, image files like PNGs or JPEGs, You can also create pages fully from HTML. And if you have live content housed in a CMS, you can use that. You can create a feed from that content and bring that into your page. Right. So in terms of folder structure with these layers, this is what it's going to look like once you've exported your pages, probably from InDesign or whatever program you're using. So your first layer, which is our video layer, so that one sits right at the bottom. That one is called p1-1.mov. So just to look a bit closer at the naming here. So P means it's portrait. 1 means it's page 1. So you'll see all three files are called P1. So they all make up page 1. And then the second number denotes the layer. So P1-1 is the bottommost layer. P1-2 sits on top of that, and P1-3 on top of that. So you can create a number of layers to make up a page. Yeah, something just to consider is the more layers you have, the more the iPad, or the harder the iPad needs to work to render those pages. All right, then looking at interactivity. Now we've got an example here of a vertical in-page slideshow. So a slideshow that can scroll vertically. So the way to create that is in InDesign, you create a transparent box and you would hyperlink that box and give it the code VIPS1. So that is the standard Oomph code to create a vertical in-page slideshow. So hopefully already you'll see a correlation between the functionality, so the vertical in-page slideshow, and the name, so VIPS1. So in most cases, or probably 99% of the cases, the whatever interactive object you're trying to create has a very logical sort of code attached to it. So these codes are really quite easy to learn. It's probably, it'll take you a few days to pick up, and once it's part of your language, it just sort of becomes part of your normal flow of design. All right, so we've created our hyperlink called VIPS1 in InDesign. We then export our pages. So you'll see we have a P1-1, so that is my main page. And on that page, or within that page, I've got a vertical in-page slideshow. Now the slide that actually scrolls within that slideshow sits within the folder called VIPS1. So a way to think about it is whatever hyperlink you create in InDesign, you'll have a corresponding folder in your folder structure. So another way to think about it is that you're creating a container for content. So a hyperlink is the container, and then you need to put something inside that container in your folder structure. So you can see there is the slide that I've exported, and it's longer than my box, so that's what enables it to scroll, and that I've called S1-1, which an easy way to remember that is S for slide. So a slide goes into your folder within your main story folder. All right, so that's basically how Oomph works. So using the concept of layering and then creating interactivity through using hyperlinks. Okay, now taking a bit of a closer look at the types of pages that you can use. So in the example we were looking at here, we were using a portrait page. You can also use a landscape page. So that's obviously one that fits into the landscape orientation of the iPad. If you rotate your iPad, nothing, well, actually, there's a portrait page in, in here, so yeah, it'll display the portrait version. Right, so there's a landscape page, a portrait page, and then, so you can see here, it's called P1-1. The landscape one is called L1-1. And then we've got a a B page, which basically means both. So a page that works in both orientations. As you can see here, it's essentially a portrait page that's been chopped in half, so that the rest of it sort of hangs below the end of the screen, or the fold of the page, if you will. So yeah, the B page is created through designing a portrait page and calling it B1-1 rather than P1-1. All right, now we also have, so once you sort of put your story together, you're going to have probably more than one page in whichever feature you're designing. So you have a choice of using snap pages to stitch together a story. So snap pages fit exactly into the size of the iPad screen. Or you can use a scrolling page or a tall page. So that one, it enables you to sort of move the page and stop anywhere in between, whereas the snap page won't allow you to stop in the middle of the two. All right, so those are the two types of pages for creating your stories. Now, this is another, or a further example of layering up your pages. So this is a portrait page with 2 additional layers on top of it, so it's got 3 layers making up the page, and the 2 uppermost layers are animated. So you can see by their names, P1-2 moving from left, P1-3 moving from right, that they're animating on the page, and it is because of the way they've been named that they're animating. All right, so that's just a further example of layering up pages and bringing those layers onto the page through animations. So that is, to create an animation in Oomph is really just that simple. It's just through naming your page through this predefined command that Oomph understands that you create the movement. Right. All right. Now we're going to be looking at a few practical examples here. I'm going to be using this app to show you how to create 2 types of slideshows. But before I do that, I just want to recap or make sure that we're okay with these page types. So I just want to show you an example of how to set up your page in InDesign. So I'm just going to cut to InDesign. Now, if you're going to, so I'm going to create a new document. Now, in the latest version of InDesign, so this is InDesign CC that I'm using here, it has a few predefined page types. So yeah, makes it really easy to set things up now for the tablet. So in my presets, I go to digital publishing. I can then, I've saved some defaults or some presets for myself, but I'll start from scratch. So yeah, untick those. So in this drop down, the page size, choose iPad. So that'll automatically give you the size of the iPad, which is 1024 by 768 pixels. And then you can choose whichever orientation you want. And then, yeah, the margins that feel comfortable for you. All right, so yeah, in the new InDesign, it's pretty easy just to select the right type of page from the drop downs. And that's really all you need to set up a page for your app in InDesign. Okay. All right, so just getting back to our example that we're going to be using. So in this little app that I've created, we have an animation on our first page, so a layer moving in from the right. On our second, or the contents page, we have a vertical in-page slideshow. So we'll look at how to create that. And then on my sort of lineups page, I have an in-page slideshow. So a slideshow that you can swipe through horizontally. All right, so let's have a look at the InDesign documents that we use to create those 3 pages and that type of interactivity. Right, now on my cover, I've laid out all my elements the way I want them in the positions I like, and then when you get to the stage where you're ready to export your page, you're going to isolate the elements that you want to animate onto the page. So if I look at my layers over here, you'll notice that the text is sitting on its own layer. So I'm just going to call this U1-2. Now you don't need to name these layers in InDesign in any specific way. This is purely for your own reference and whatever helps you to organize your files most efficiently. So I like to name the name of my layer, the same thing that I'm going to call my Oomph file, just so that there's no confusion and it's easier for other people to work on if they do come into this same document. All right, so whichever element you want to animate onto the screen, you're going to isolate, put on its own layer, and you're going to turn that layer off. So you're going to start by exporting your bottom layer. All right, so in your export settings, you're going to go, so export. Okay, I'm just going to go straight into, so I'm working in a folder called My First App. Now, just something to notice here. Okay, so these are all the files that are making up the app I've been showing you. So it's important to give your file or your folder a number and a name. So once you've done that, so you're going to create a folder for your story. Now I've just called that folder My First App. You could start at the beginning and call it cover, whatever you like. And then you're going to export your first layer. So because I'm working in landscape, I'm going to call my file L, and it's my first page, so I'm going to call it L1, and it's the first layer, so -1. So I'm going to export that into there. Let me just replace that, and I'm going to use the following export settings. Okay, now there are really 3 things to be aware of when exporting an Oomph page. First of all, your hyperlinks need to be ticked. That's really important. Otherwise, none of your interactivity is going to work. Compression, setting things at 72 is fine. Because you've set your page up to the exact size of the iPad, 72 dpi is fine. And then in your output, you want to convert to destination as an RGB profile. So CMYK does not look good on a screen for those of you coming from sort of a print background. So just be aware that, yeah, if you are using existing print materials, that you do convert to RGB, and that all your colors in InDesign are RGB colors. Okay, so it's really those 3 things: RGB, your compression at 72, and that your hyperlinks are ticked in general. Now I've saved that as an Oomph setting. All right, so you can press export. Okay, yes, unfortunately my links are missing. That's okay for now. Right, so that's my first layer. I've exported as L1-1. Next, I'm going to export the text, which will animate onto the screen. So using the same export setting. So now I'm going to use an animation command. Now, Oomph has a series of commands that it understands. So animations are some of them. All your codes for creating slideshows, card flips, and everything like that has a code attached to it that Okay, sorry about that. We just needed to check that everything was okay. Okay, so that is how you create this page. So our first page. So we have a bottom layer, it's static, and then a second layer that moves in from the right. So just to have a look at that folder structure again. So let me just get there quick. All right, so there's the folder I exported into. There's my L1-1 and my L1-2. All right, so that's an example of basic animation in Oomph. How to create a vertical in-page slideshow. I've designed all my elements and set it up the way I need it to be. And I've already created a hyperlink or the box that I want my slideshow to sit in. Right, so just to show you the two pages together, I have my box that my slide is going to sit in, and then on the following page I have the content that's going to sit in that box, so my slide. Right, now to create a hyperlink, you simply, so I'm just going to work over this, you simply draw a box. Maybe let me just, call hyperlinks 2. And let me just get my swatches. All right, so we don't need any color on our box, so we're just going to create a transparent box. Now, it's important that the width of your box and the width of your slide on the following page is the same dimensions. All right, so I'm just going to measure this page. So that's 400. Let's make it 400 pixels wide and make our box 400 pixels wide. All right, so we've got our size of our box set up now. Right, so to create a new hyperlink, so you get out your hyperlinks panel, click on your box, say new, sorry, not sure what's happened there. All right, so create new hyperlink. Now you're going to put the code for a vertical in-page slideshow, which is VIPS. Now, the reason that you use the number after the code is of the same type of object on your page, you can differentiate them from each other. So you could have VIPS1, VIPS2, and so forth. So it's important to put the code in and then also the number or a number. I guess it's logical just to start at 1, but you don't need to as long as there is a number after code. All right, now another important thing when you're creating a hyperlink is to uncheck the shared destination. If you don't, your hyperlink is not going to work once you preview your file on the iPad or the simulator. Okay, so you put your code in and you say okay. Right, so your hyperlink is now created. I've set up the text that I'll be scrolling on. So once you have those elements, be exporting into its own folder. So each story has its own folder. So for our cover, or our first page, we were exporting into a folder called My First App. So I've now created another folder called Contents, and I will export my pages of the contents into that folder. Right, so we start again with our first page. So contents, we only have one layer in this story. We don't have any animations, so there's no need to create more layers. So you call that one L1-1. So first layer in our first page as a landscape page. Say save, and we're exporting page 11. Okay. And then we export our slide page. So you export that into a folder within your main folder called VIPS1. So as I mentioned before, in the example of the interactivity, whatever you've called your hyperlink in InDesign, you're going to create the same folder and you're going to export your slide into that folder. So an easy way to remember this is that anything that's not a page is going to be called S1-1. So your main page will be L or P or B, and anything smaller than your page is going to be an S1-1. So that works on the same principle. It's my first slide and it's my first layer in that slide. So the same way you can do it, but in this case there's no need to, so we're just going to have S1-1. All right, so you export that, same settings. We're exporting page 12. All right, so that was page 12. Right, so you have your page with your transparent box hyperlinked as VIPS1 and a slide inside that folder. Okay, so let's have a look at the folders that we've created so far. I'm going to preview these folders on the simulator. So I'm going to drag it into Oomph Editor. It'll open up, and I'll just click play on the simulator. And there we go. There's our first page. Let's do the same with our second folder. It's our contents page. Drag it onto the editor. Press play. Have a scrolling VIPS. Okay. All right. So in our, just to go back to our original bundle. So 9:35. 390. Right, so the page tool, you can either type in dimensions at the top here, or you can simply drag the corner of the page and resize it that way. So that's a really handy tool in some of the newer versions of InDesign. Okay, right, so I've got my box in place. Now I add my hyperlink to that. So in your hyperlinks panel, say create new hyperlink. I'm going to type in my code for an in-page slideshow, which is IPS, and I'm going to add a number. So I'll just add 1, because this is the first IPS in this layout. Uncheck the hyperlink destination and say OK. Okay, so your hyperlink is now created for your in-page slideshow. All right, so we'll do the same. Export our first page. So I've created a folder called Want to Watch for this one. Create your first layer of the first page layer, so L1-1. Export that. So we're exporting page 13. Okay. And then we're going to export the 2 slides for the in-page slideshow. So same name as the hyperlink on my InDesign page, IPS1, and you're going to export those 2 pages into the same PDF called S1-1. Right. Now, if you wanted to, you could export those pages separately, call the first one S1-1 and call the second one S2-1, because so it means page 1 and page 2 of your slideshow, but there's no need to. You can put any number of slides into the same PDF in your slideshow. So yeah, that cuts out a bit of work. All right, and then we're going to export pages 14 and 15. All right, and let's preview our folder then. So in our Want to Watch, we have our base page and our in-page slideshow. We have 2 slides. Let's drag that onto the simulator. Play. Let it load. Here it comes. And we have our in-page slideshow. All right. Great. So yeah, that was just a really quick introduction to the tools that you need to create your first Oomph app, a little bit about what Oomph is, a practical example of how to create layers and interactivity. And so we're going to open the floor to question time now, if you have any questions. Just a few closing notes before we do that. If you want to learn more about Oomph, please head over to oomphhq.com/webinars to register for our other webinars coming up. So we'll be dealing with sort of more specific topics, some advanced features, all sorts of things relating to helping people to create great interactive apps using Oomph. To find out more information or to read more about things that I've chatted to you about today, I'll just show you. So I'm just going to go to our website. So our documentation page is a good place to find out all sorts of information about what I've told you today and other things. Okay, so if you want to have a look at a VIPS, like the example I showed you, you can just type in VIPS. So there we go, vertical in-page slideshow. And that will give you a recap on what we've been through. So everything from the hotspot, so the code for each interactive element. There's a video to watch on what it looks like. There's a video on how to create it in InDesign. And yeah, any sort of other special things you can do with that hotspot or that bit of interactivity or that feature. Okay, yeah, so that is at support.oomphhq.com, and you can read about features, more about Oomph, and that over there. All right, guys, thanks very much for joining. And yeah, we hope to see you again at one of our future webinars.